Kaya. Kaya. Kaya Wanjo, hello and welcome. My name is Simon Forrest Burungu, and I'm a Wajak Baladong Noongar with kin connections to Yamaji and Wongai peoples. And as a Wajak elder, I'm here to welcome you to Nalabuja, my country, and I especially welcome Behrouz Boochani. I am of this land and place. The maternal line of my family have been living on this land you might know as the Swan Coastal Plain for 1,000 generations, or at least 40,000 years. The Swan Coastal Plain is known by my people as Wajak Noongar Buja. Our welcome to country recognises and acknowledges us as the very first Australians and the first and continuing custodians of this land we call Australia. And that this land we know as Australia was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. And First Nations people from around the globe have referred to us as the very first of the first peoples. Australia is one of the most culturally diverse nations on the planet, and it is this cultural diversity that makes Australia a wonderful place to live. As individuals, as a community and as a nation, we all have a responsibility to acknowledge this. We all have to be accepting and skilled in interacting with fellow Australians who may be from different cultural backgrounds. I, as an Aboriginal Australian, as a first Australian, embrace the cultural diversity of our nation, and in particular, especially welcome people that have come to this country as refugees. I sincerely believe Australia should be increasing its refugee intake, not reducing it. This land was colonised for the purpose of establishing penal colonies. The first people transported here from England were criminals, the poor, and Irish political prisoners. This colonial practice and attitude continues today. Today, we still imprison people who commit crimes, and the poor. But the Irish political prisoners have been replaced by the imprisonment in obscene numbers of Indigenous Australians and people from other countries seeking asylum. The former Anglican Dean of Perth, the Reverend Richard Pengelly, said to me a few years back after I performed a Welcome to Country in St George's Cathedral, he was perplexed how Indigenous Australians sincerely and warmly welcome people to our Buja, to our land, despite our treatment as part of the colonial process. Yet for many years in Australia, our political leadership and many others in our community are about not welcoming people to our country. Kaya. Kaya Wanju. Nan Kwel Simon Forrest Burungu. Kaya Wanju Nidja Wajak Noongar Buja. Nala Karich Noongar Mor. Kain Karich Nidja Buja. Nan Karich Noongar Kabali Boran Korea. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for your welcome and your generous words in welcoming us and all, and including everyone from a refugee background who is here. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we're meeting here today on the land of the Wajak Noongar peoples, and to pay my deep respects to you and to all elders present, past and emerging. And I'd also like to note how important it is to acknowledge the history of Australia when we gather here today, and always when we gather to talk about how it is that we treat people who have come here recently, people who have come here fleeing persecution, how important it is to remember the history and the ongoing legacies of that colonial history. This is our fourth annual Human Rights Lecture, and I'd like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to our Director and Harissa Handa Chair of Human Rights, Professor Baden Offord, who unfortunately wasn't able to come this evening. One of the many extraordinary contributions that Baden has made to us, to our centre and to the university, is to start this annual Human Rights Lecture. And to start it, to consider how we might understand human rights, how we might understand that concept. What does it mean to all of us? What is the diversities of its meanings? And also how we might understand ourselves, how we might understand each other and our communities, the country that we live in and beyond. And for this, it means including and elevating the lived experiences of others, deeply listening to others, considering it as a vital source of knowledge from which we can learn and consider how it might be best that we all live together. And it's in this spirit that Behrouz, who continues to be forced to remain on Manus Island, will address us this evening. But before that, I'd like to now introduce Professor Deborah Terry, who's the Vice-Chancellor of Curtin University, and she'll be welcoming us to this evening's lecture and introducing Behrouz. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and good evening, everybody. And thank you, Simon, for your very thoughtful welcome to country. Can I begin by acknowledging that we are gathered here today on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and that we honour their elders and their continuing cultural and spiritual connection to this land as we walk together on the path to reconciliation. I'd like to particularly acknowledge, obviously, tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. Behrouz Boochani, and welcome everybody to Curtin University's 2019 Annual Human Rights Lecture. And as Caroline has said, this lecture was established 3 years ago as a key initiative of Curtin's Centre for Human Rights Education. In 2016, the inaugural lecture was delivered by Professor Gillian Triggs, our former president of the Australian Human Rights Commission. Dr Waleed Aly, writer, academic and award-winning broadcaster, gave the lecture in 2017. And last year we heard from the Honourable Michael Kirby AC, CMG, former Justice of the High Court of Australia and patron of the Centre for Human Rights Education. So continuing in what is already a prestigious tradition, we are privileged to have Behrouz Boochani delivering this important lecture tonight. Behrouz is an Iranian Kurdish journalist, a human rights advocate, an author, a poet and a film producer. He will speak about the plight of refugees, sharing his own experiences as a refugee on Manus Island, where he has been since 2013. Before I introduce Behrouz in more detail, can I say, as it is each year that we hold this lecture, how pleasing it is to see so many people here this evening, so obviously interested in the state of human rights in Australia. This annual lecture was established to encourage a strong human rights culture and conversation both within and outside our university. Universities play a very important role in ensuring that we deliver on the vision of an Australia where human rights are fully realised and enjoyed by all. Not only do we as an institution empower and change lives through education, but we help to build an understanding of the fundamental importance of human rights. And we do this in multiple ways, through our own teaching programs, through our public engagement, like our John Curtin Gallery's recent exhibition entitled Refuge, that used 2 powerful video installations to highlight the experiences of refugees. We also have a very active group of researchers in the field of human rights, including Baden Orford, who we've already heard from, and I also commend Baden for his leadership, Director of the Centre for Human Rights Education, and his colleagues at the Centre, Caroline Flay and Lisa Hartley. And from the School of Media, Creative Arts and Social Inquiry, we have other researchers, Sue Vendrini, Perara, Michelle Bowie and Marilyn Mehta. And I applaud them all for the quality and the impact of their work. Not many of us in Australia have personal experience of what it is like to have to seek refuge in another country, to flee one's home in fear, to leave behind everything we've ever known and to ask strangers in a foreign land for shelter or asylum. Through Behrouz Boochani's first-hand account and lived experience as a refugee, tonight's public lecture will, I have no doubt, very powerfully shine a light on the plight and the experiences of refugees. And I know that this will engender among all of us here understanding and empathy. But I also hope that it goes further by helping us all to do what we can to improve outcomes for the increasing number of displaced people across the world. Behrouz is an ethnic Kurd who fled Iran in 2013 after several of his journalist colleagues were arrested. He went through Southeast Asia and then travelled by boat to Christmas Island. From there, he was deported to Manus Island. He had studied at universities in Tehran and holds a master's degree in political science, political geography and geopolitics. Behrouz was a writer for a major Kurdish language magazine. He's now an honorary member of PEN International. He is also the non-resident visiting scholar at the Sydney Asia Pacific Migration Centre at the University of Sydney. He was winner of an Amnesty International Award in 2017 and the Liberty Victoria 2018 Empty Chair Award. He publishes regularly with The Guardian, and his writing also features in the Saturday paper, New Matilda, the Financial Times and the Sydney Morning Herald. Behrouz was also co-director of the 2017 feature-length film Chuka, Please Tell Us the Time. And he's author of No Friend But the Mountains, Writing from Manus Prison, a book that recently won the Victorian Premier's Prize for Literature. On winning the prize, he said, "I've been in a cage for years, but throughout this time my mind has always been producing words, and these words have taken me across borders, taken me overseas and to unknown places. I truly believe words are more powerful than the fences of this place, this prison." Australian writer Richard Flanagan eloquently summed up why his work is so important when he said, and I quote, "Behrouz Boochani kept on smuggling out his messages of despair in the hope we would listen. It's time we did." Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. And just before we introduce Behrouz, I'm now going to introduce Michelle Bowie, because we'll be playing a short excerpt from Behrouz's documentary, Chalker, Please Tell Us the Time. Michelle is an activist with the Refugee Rights Action Network here in WA, and she's also a research assistant on the ARC-funded project Deathscapes, led by Professor Sivendrini Pereira here at Curtin. Michelle's engagement in political activism has allowed her to work closely with people seeking asylum who are incarcerated onshore and offshore, as well as those living in the community. She is a tireless supporter of people seeking asylum, and we're thrilled that she's able to be here and present here and help us pull this together. Michelle is a supporter of Behrouz's work, and she's collaborated with Behrouz on several Perth-based actions and events over the past few years. So I'm going to now welcome Michelle, who's going to facilitate the rest of Behrouz.
Thank you, Caroline, for that introduction. I'd also like to just acknowledge and thank Professor Simon Forrest for your welcome to country this evening, and acknowledge that we are on Whadjuk Noongar land. So as Caroline mentioned before, we hand over to Behrouz to deliver the Curtin Annual Human Rights Lecture. We'll first show a short excerpt that he's provided us of the critically acclaimed film Chalker, Please Tell Us the Time, that he co-directed with Arash Kamali Sarvastani. The feature-length film was recorded on Behrouz's mobile phone and is a testament to the power of art and film to communicate in ways that other mediums cannot. Overcoming technical difficulties and the challenges associated with working across countries and time zones, the film is an important artwork, visual testimony, and also a historical document which assists those of us who have never had the experience of being detained on Manus Island to visualise and imagine life in the Manus prison. This prison, where hundreds of men were incarcerated for over 4 years, was physically demolished following the forced removal of men from the camp in November 2017. Despite this attempted act of erasure, this film, in addition to countless written testimonies and reports, will ensure that history cannot be forgotten. Filmed through, between and behind the wire, this visually poetic film provides a unique perspective into the spatiality and temporality of life in Australia's offshore prison on Manus Island. Chocker, Please Tell Us the Time has been screened at countless films nationally and internationally, including the London International Film Festival, where it was shortlisted for a Grierson Award, which recognises films with integrity, originality and social or cultural significance, and the Sydney Film Festival, where it came third place in the Audience Award for the Best Documentary. Locally, the film was screened by the Refugee Rights Action Network during World Refugee Week last year, but for anyone who missed it, it's now available to watch online on Vimeo, so we'll just go to the video now.
Is it a special bird for you?
Just like in Australia, you say kangaroo. When you say kangaroo, you mention kangaroo, you say Australian.
Yeah.
Or in PNG, when you say kumul, you say, oh, it's PNG.
Yeah.
So here in Manus, when you say chauka, oh, Manus. It reminds of our home. It's our identity.
So when did this happen?
گذاشتنشون زیر مشت و لگد. بعد من که باهاشون اومدم، خلاصه از ترسم بود که باهاشون بیام، داشتم می اومدم یه نفر از این ور یه نفر از این ور دستمو گرفته بود. دستمو گرفته بودن، همینجور که داشتم باشون راه میرفتم یه نفر دستشو انداخت، از پشت سرم دستشو انداخت تو گردنم. من فکر کردم میخواد منو مهار کنه، مثلا ازشون فرار نکنم. یه دفعه دیدم دستشو کشید. دردی حس نکردم، نمیدونم با چی کشید، چاقو بود، تیغ بود، معلوم نیست.
And then a big question coming up is, then if you start pushing it here and there, who's responsible now? Is it the Manusians? Is it the PNG government? Is it the Australian government? Is it the UNHCR? Or who is responsible?
الان بعضی موقع یکیشون رو میبینم بعد چند ماه دوباره یکیشون رو میبینم موه بدنم سیخ میشه. اینقدر بدم ازش میاد. این چه بلایی سرمون آورد اونجا. خیلی اذیتمون کردن تو چوکا. اصلا یه حالت دگرگونی برای من داشتن. انگار یه دنیای دیگه بود تو چوکا.
سلام، شبت بخیر. آقا میلاد بود، میلاد پلاتینی پشت ناقص بود. یه چند روز بود اعتصاب خوش بود، بهش توجه نمیکردن. حدود یه هفته بود اعتصاب خوش بود، بهش توجه نمیکردن. الان با چاقو خودش زده، چاقو کرده تو شکمش، برشتش هم بردنش آیکمه.
So I think the clip that we've all just watched deals with several important issues. The first one, and one of the most striking, is perhaps how Australia chose to use the name of a bird significant to the cultural identity of the local people on Manus Island to refer to a solitary confinement unit within the Manus prison that has become synonymous with violence, with deprivation and with torture. Throughout the film, the viewer gets a sense of Australia's ongoing colonialism in Manus Island and how the offshore processing policy undermines the sovereignty of both island nations and how this connects to a long and deep history. We see glimpses of the day-to-day monotony of the camp juxtaposed with the natural beauty of the island. Of course, one of the objectives of the offshore processing regime is to displace people, to displace responsibility and accountability away from the Australian government. So this is an issue within the film that is raised by local people who are caught up in a policy that they never consented to. The choice to end the clip at the point of a medical emergency, I think, conveys to us the pervasive uncertainty and precarity of life within the camp. It underscores how the possibility of death is omnipresent and lingers over the prisoners, threatening to suffocate them at any moment. I think Behrouz in past has described the state as living within the shadow of death. The lethal capabilities invested in the policy of deterrence have unfortunately been evidenced on many occasions. As we all know, since the death of Reza Barati in February 2014, 11 others have died while in the custody of the Australian government on Manus Island and Nauru. So it remains in this context that Behrouz Boochani joins us tonight. Behrouz's work spans multiple disciplines and represents witness, survival and resistance. From the film that we've just seen an excerpt of, Choka, Please Tell Us the Time, to his book, No Friend But the Mountains, and his play, the Manus play that he collaborated on with Nazanin Sahamizadeh. His work has traversed the arts, critical scholarship, along with more traditional forms of journalism and activism. So without further ado, I will hand over to Behrouz, who joins us live from Port Moresby, who from his position of exile and incarceration in PNG has been an unrelenting human rights defender at the forefront of resistance to Australia's offshore processing policies for almost 6 years. Please welcome Behrouz.
I would like to thank you everyone for attending this event. It is a great honor for me to speak in this place. Actually, I am a quite shy person, but people don't know because people know me through my words and my writing. So yeah, Simon mentioned a good point. He mentioned talk about colonialism. So let's I start with this concept. I think my understanding of this policy is that this policy is established on colonialist thinking, and we cannot understand this policy without understanding history of Australia and history of colonialism in this country. I had this opportunity to read about Australian history, and I can see that there is a similarity between what the Australian government is doing on Manus Island and Nauru with what had happened in the history of this country. So that's why I think it's very important that we think about this. I am an indigenous person as well. I am Kurdish, and I was born in Kurdistan as a part of Iran. And the whole my life, in Iran, I was living in discrimination and colonialism, and I understand deeply what the colonialism is mean. So when I arrived at Christmas Island, they exiled me by force to Manus Island, and I found out that this place, I found a different kind of colonialism, but it was not a strange thing for me. I could understand it, and I could understand the elements of colonialism in this policy. And over the past 6 years, I always try to defend Manusian people as well. In Australia, unfortunately, in the media or in public, people think that Manusian people are, dangerous people, or they are uncivilized people. It is the word that Peter Dutton used, and he said that Australia, Australia is a civilized country, and he used uncivilized word for others. But what I did and what I am doing is to break this picture that Manusian people are people with different culture and background, and they are owner of this island. It is their land. And in the movie, Choka, Please Tell Us the Time, and in my book and other my works, I always try to break this picture and create a picture, a real picture of, and true picture of Manusian people. So they have used this island and Nauru for their political aims for years and years. And even the Manusian people, if they didn't talk with them, they didn't talk with the governor of Manus, they never respect these people. And that's why, they are using this island. And so there are many things that we say about colonialism in this policy. So they never respect these people. But in fact, if someone asks us to introduce an uncivilized side, I think that is Australian government, because they are doing these crimes. They have done this crime. They have tortured people. They have killed people. So not Manusian people. when they sent us to Manus, I describe this in my book, that they told the local people that these people that are living in this, we are bringing them to this island, are dangerous people, they are criminals, they are terrorists. And they, in other side, they told us that Manusian people are cannibals, they are uncivilized, and they are not modern people. So it's better that you don't communicate with them and make a relation with them. And they have used this fear. They created this fear for years, and they have used it over the past 6 years. That we could see in the riot on 2017 that Reza Barati died and hundreds of people injured. They provoked local people to attack us and beat refugees. And they used that on that time. And so I want to say that it is colonialism, and it is clear. I can give you more examples just because we don't have time. I wanted to say that in Australia, if you think about human rights, my understanding is that this system is treating the minorities and social minorities in a way they are treating indigenous people in Australia or refugees. So my understanding is that unfortunately the social movements in Australia, like feminism, the LGBT people, environment movement, the indigenous movement, the refugees movement, these social movements unfortunately don't support each other. And sometimes some of them think that other movements are like a rival for them, and it's better they don't support. For example, I think it was last year I had a speech in one of the universities, and a person that he introduced herself as an indigenous person, she said that we don't support refugees. She said that, and it was very strange for me. It is only an example of many examples. And I told her that we are victims of the same system. So the soul of this system is same. So my understanding is that we don't work like island, and we should work together. And even in the refugees movement, there are many organizations who are working separately, and they cannot work together. And that is the very strange, that it seems they forget their aims. My understanding is that people should understand this, that all of us are victims of the same system, but with different pictures, different faces. For years and years, I have participated in many protests in Australia for refugees. And many times I say that these organizations should come together and work together. But unfortunately, still they are working separately. So that is a problem. I think we should think about this. And I think it can be an answer for this question, that what's happened for Australia, that still the government is able to justify this barbaric policy. What's happened that in Australia, still a big part of the society support this barbaric policy. it is a main question that the civil society should answer. And the people, the activists, the social activists, and people who stand up for humanity should think about this. And I think a part of the answer for this question is that the social movements are working separately. And even among the refugees, organizations are working separately. So I think it is a good question, and we should answer this, and we should criticize ourselves. The organization, the people, the key people should answer this question and think about this. And I think we should accept that the government, unfortunately, the government has been successful to justify this barbaric policy, because we are here for 6 years is too many. 6 years is too many. Another thing I would like to mention, I think it's better I give you some, information about the current situation. As you may know, about 3 months ago, the Australian Parliament passed a bill, Medivac bill. So we have a law, Medivac law. So according to this law, if two independent doctors write a letter to the minister and recommend that some individual people are sick in Manus and Nauru, the government must take them to Australia to get medical treatment. So we should look at this law after 3 months. So far, only 2 people transferred to Australia. Only 2 people. And I think we should ask this question from the refugees, organizations. They made a group, Medivac group. Just 2 days ago, I published an article in the Saturday paper. So I refer to that article, that I criticize these organizations because they are supposed to help us and help us to, get off of this country. But unfortunately, right now, they became like a part of the problem, because the process is very slow. It's very slow, but I am not sure that it is deliberately or not, but the process is, very slow, and we are frustrated. We are disappointed with this law. So that is a big problem. But still, I think this law has this potential that we transfer many people from Manus and Nauru to Australia. So hopefully, after the election, we be able, to work faster. But I am the refugee. His name is Behrouz Boochani. So we worked on this. On a list of sick refugees for, I think, 5 months, 6 months, with some individual advocates in Australia. So we collected all of the information, all of the documents, and when the bill passed, we delivered those information and documents to the Medivac group, these organizations. And they should work with those 2 doctors to evacuate people, sick people. But after 3 months, nothing happened. Nothing happened. We have information, we have documents, and should something happen? And we have a law, so according to this law, something should happen. But unfortunately, nothing happened. So just a few days ago, I had this chance to visit PIH hospital in Port Moresby. About 20 people were there, and some of them were living on wheelchair, some of them were extremely skinny and they lost weight. I met a Sikh refugee. He was, I think, less than 50 kilos. And some of them even cannot talk, cannot speak. And in Granville Motel, there are at least 20 people who are very sick, but they discharge them. So there is not medical treatment for these Sikh refugees. But the main problem is in Manus Island. In Manus Island, we have some very serious and urgent cases. There is a man who is with heart problem, but they left him on the bed for 2 weeks and nothing happened for him. There is not medical facility in Manus Island. And I'm sure there is not in Nauru because this system is same. So they are using this as a tools to torture refugees, to force them go back to their countries. And that is problem. That is a big problem. And I think what I see in Manus Island is a tragedy. Is a tragedy. Without doubt, is a tragedy because there are hundreds of people who damaged physically and mentally. And let's don't forget that so far 12 people died on Manus Island and Nauru. And I think the system is clear. The torture is clear. The systematic torture is clear for people. So if in Australia, some people and some politicians claim that they don't know what is happening on Manus and Nauru, definitely they are lying. There are many information and documents in the internet. There are many stories in the internet. If they search, if they Google it, they can reach to many information about the situation. So it is the current situation on Manus Island. So I don't know what will happen. But really we are tired of this system. We are tired of the organizations. I know by writing that article, I created enemies for myself. But for me, as an independent person, as an individual person, what is important is that I tell true and tell this story independent. And that's why I think I will continue if this process be slow and if I understand that this organization don't work well, I will criticize and I will write. And I don't know that this word is right or not, but I will expose everything. I will expose that. So hopefully, but we should be positive and optimistic. So I hope that something changed after the election. So just I can't say that. Yeah, and one thing I would like to mention, I think I talk a lot, but one thing I think it's better. I think my time is finished, so I talk enough. So we can continue with Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Behrouz, for your thought-provoking and insightful lecture. I think you've given us all a lot to think about and a lot to, and I guess provoked us to, or encouraged us to challenge ourselves and reflect on what we're doing and what we can do. So as you announced, we will go to Q&A now if anyone has any questions. I would ask that people please keep their questions concise and brief so we can get through as many as possible, and that we only have questions rather than statements. That would be great. So we've got our roving mic over here.
Thank you, Behrouz. That was very interesting what you said. I'm interested in your perspective as an Indigenous person. What is your opinion on the relationship between the colonial system that imprisoned you and the first people of Australia, and specifically the fact that the system or the people that executed the laws somehow did it illegally because there is no treaty between the mainstream Australia, the political system, and the Indigenous people. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think, talking about, Indigenous people, because I am an Indigenous person and I know sometimes it's sensitive and it's better that we let the Indigenous people to talk about themselves and criticize. But I don't want to, I think I am not in a position to talk on behalf of Indigenous people. But my understanding, I think it was 2 years ago that some Indigenous people died in custody. And when I read that news, I felt that I know deeply that why these young men, these people died, because it was very similar with what is happening on Manus and Nauru. It was very, very similar. So that's why I think, already I mentioned that the system is same. The system is same. And the soul of this system is same. And we should recognize that. We should understand that. And what I try to say in my book exactly is I say that the whole thing that I want to say is that there is a connection between Manus Island, Manus prison system, and what is happening in Australia in the society. So I think we should try to understand Manus prison system. I try to describe that. I try to expose this system. I think it is an original version in Manus because they are deliberately use this to torture refugees. So if we understand the soul of Manus prison system, I think we are able to understand, the system in Australia as well. So there is a connection between this. But for Aboriginal, for Indigenous people, actually, I didn't have enough time to read a lot about history of Australia, but I read something generally, and that, my works on future, I think, is that I should dive in history of Australia to understand that what's happened in the history of this country, that, after years and years, after 100 years, 200 years, they created this system in Manus and Nauru. So that's why, I am looking forward that for future that I have this time to try to find an answer for this question. So I think on future I will understand more about, because we don't forget I never put my feet in Australia land, so I'm in Manus. Yeah.
Behrouz, thank you very much for what you've said. It's really challenged us, and I think many of us will try to be more organised. Many of us, our hearts have been with you for years and years, but we don't seem to have been able to make a difference. My first question is, you are in Port Moresby. Does that mean you were ill? Because usually you were on Manus.
No, actually, they thank you very much for. They sent me here to do interview with Americans. So hopefully one day I go to America. I don't know, but it is a very slow process. So it's not mean that I am here, so I will be in America in 2 months. Perhaps after 6 years. I don't know.
My second question, Behrouz, is could you please explain the typhoid situation that's happening amongst the men?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that. I forgot that. Yes, they transferred 2 persons, I think last week from Manus because they were sick, and they transferred 2 yesterday. So far they transferred 4 people from Manus to Port Moresby, and the problem is that they now have, they cannot examine, they cannot test those people who are sick in Manus, I mean. So we should wait. I think hopefully that don't be a very, very serious, but of course, so far 4 people, transferred to Port Moresby. So I think on next few days we will hear more. Hopefully that doesn't be a very serious issue. But right now, some people are sick in Manus, but still we don't know that they are with typhoid or not. So I think, I don't know exactly what will happen for these guys. But so far, they transferred 4 people.
While the mic's transferring to the next person, I might just ask a question. You mentioned the possibility of resettlement in the US, and that brings me back to one of the key points that you made during the October-November resistance or the siege in 2017, was that you would never settle for anything less than freedom, only freedom, and that everything else, including the living conditions, for example, are all just peripheral issues. As someone who's still subject to the current offshore processing policy, I wonder if you could comment on what it would actually mean for people like yourself on Manus and Nauru, and even those who've been transferred to Australia, to actually be free. What does freedom mean in this context?
I think, it is the one of the main concepts that I always use in my writing and my works is systematic torture. So what does systematic torture mean? We had the court case in PNG. So the court ordered that Manus prison camp is illegal and keeping people in prison is illegal. And on that time, we thought that we will get freedom very soon. But the government used that order to keep us in Manus. They opened the gates and they relocated us to new camps. For American deal, on that time, people were very optimistic. The media were talking about this a lot. The government used this as a big achievement. But I remember on that time, I did a tweet and I said, it is nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. So after about 3 years, still we are here, and still this country, I mean America, is interviewing people. They are doing this process. They put us through a bureaucratic system, and they are torturing us by this. Many people injured themselves, they attempt suicide because they were rejected by America. And they don't explain that why they rejected this person. So I mean, anything in Manus become like a torture. This Medivac bill, People were happy. They thought that it is a big achievement. But now we can see that the organizations are, putting us through another bureaucratic process, a long process. I explained in the article that I published 2 days ago that if they continue like this, after 128 years, they will transfer people. So Manus and Nauru finished. So why that happen? Why that happen? We should answer people. If they cannot do that, they should explain to public. They should explain. If they think they are not able to transfer people, they should explain to people, public. So the thing that people forget is that we are human. We are not slave. We are not metal. We are human. So of course we cannot. Sometimes some people make me really angry. They send me email. Hello, dear Behrouz Boochani. We are in this organization. We are in America. We are doing this. We have planning to do this program, this event on 2022. So could you please, So still people are planning for. We are here for 6 years. So unfortunately, this Manus and Nauru became like an industry for many. But I want to say, it is a commodification of pain, objectification of pain. These two concepts. I want to work on these two concepts. I want to say, I, as an independent person, individual person, never allow, this capitalist system to do this. And I don't say that I am an important person, but I am an individual person. I work against any structure. If this structure be our supporters, I received many awards, but still we are here. So that awards, I think, make me like a symbol, like a celebrity. I don't want this. We don't want this. We should criticize this culture that everyone in Australia and everywhere are making, some business. And I think we should criticize this. Many people are suffering in Manus and Nauru. Really sometimes, when I get an award, I really feel sad. I don't know what should I say, I don't know what should I say when I get the award and, people say that, oh, this guy, this man get this award. I don't like, I hate that, Behrouz Boochani. I hate that. I don't want that. People, should never forget that we are here for 6 years. 6 years is too many. We have lost many things. I myself, as an example, I was 20 years old and now I am 35 years old, and many young people here are suffering. They lost many chances. They could finish their education, I know some people who made contact with me 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and they said, yeah, Behrouz, I'm going to go to university. So they did master and he is doing PhD. Still we are here, So we should criticize this kind of things. So we should criticize this. I don't want to mention an individual organizations, but any organizations, any artist, any writer, anyone who is making business. I don't say that people don't work. There are many people who did a great job. about Manus and Noro. But we can see that some people, it seems, are, looking at this plight as a, business. So that's why I think we should criticize this. We should, I don't know what should I say, I think I'm angry. So, okay.
Thank you so much for continuing to persevere despite everything that you're going through for 6 years. And I think a lot of the time it's easy to feel hopeless, even just on this end when we're so lucky and that we're not going through everything that you're going through personally. And I was just wondering, what is it that allows you to keep, what is it that gives you the strength to keep doing what you're doing for 6 years when everything seems hopeless and nothing much is changing?
Many people talk about this, but I think any individual person, I always say that, and I think it's good if I say it again. Anyone in Manus and Noro has a story, and each story is a tragedy. And anyone that will survive, so far, find a way to resist, to survive. For me, I think, I think that we now have choice, but fighting. There is not way, because we cannot go back to our countries. We cannot. If I could go back, be sure I couldn't stay in Manus under this system, that they humiliate me. I could go back 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And many of people here are like this. Many people are separated with their families for years, for years. And of course they cannot go back. So they should survive. They should resist, because they don't have choice. Just I can't say that.